We all know the impact that COVID-19 is having in the medical world. Those who test positive or show symptoms are often in isolation, and all of us are being quarantined or facing stay-at-home orders because of the pandemic. But what kind of impact is the situation having on all of our health, aside from COVID-19? The challenges of staying healthy, staying fit, the quest for wellness during a stay-at-home order. Kierra Varcos, exercise physiologist and former personal trainer, joins us to talk about those issues and more. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm Sam Chen. We all know the medical impact that COVID-19 has had, but how is it impacting us, especially those who haven't tested positive? The impact is far beyond the virus itself, and questions of fitness, wellness, how we stay healthy during stay-at-home orders have been discussed extensively online. So many of our viewers have been asking the questions, so we decided to bring in the expert. Kierra Varcos is an exercise physiologist. She's worked as a personal trainer. She's been on the program before, and we're so excited to welcome her back. Kierra, welcome back to the show. A little bit of a different setup, but we're glad to have you here.
It is. Thank you, Sam. Really glad to be back.
Always good to have you. Just so our viewers know, you're an exercise physiologist. You work as a fitness specialist.
Yes.
You've been a personal trainer. So this is very much what you do day in and day out.
Yes, it is. It is. I know right now it's really affecting people who are doing personal training and nutrition services, things like massage. A lot of these people rely on like appointment-based things for their income. Luckily, my main job is for independent living with seniors. So I am an essential employee, so I am still employed and providing services to them.
Well, thank you for doing that. I know it's a tough time to have to go out every day, so I appreciate you doing that.
Oh, thanks.
Kierra, let me ask you this. We kind of said the intro, obviously COVID-19, it's a medical issue, it's a pandemic. Yeah. But because of that, there's this quarantines, these stay-at-home orders, everything is shut down. Gyms are closed, health centers are closed. What is, just from a 30,000 foot level, what is the impact that something like this is going to have on someone's health or wellness?
People, I think I even mentioned this last time, people tend to be creatures of habit. And if they have a routine and their routine is thrown off, that can affect them physically, mentally, and in all other aspects. So I know right now people are getting a little antsy. They're getting a little bit upset that they can't do their normal routine, especially when it comes to health and wellness.
And it's that antsiness, because I mean, I felt it, and I didn't really have a choice. I was, as someone who tested positive, I was in isolation. I had no choice to go anywhere. But even there, where I knew that there was nowhere for me to go, I was getting antsy about it. Does that then, I mean, that's a mental thing. Does that then impact your physical health? Yes,
it does. I've been doing a lot of work lately on overall wellness with people. So not just fitness, not just the physical part of wellness. There are 7 different dimensions of wellness, and those are usually focused on with older adults, the people that I usually work with. But all people, no matter what age, need to focus on these dimensions of wellness. The main ones are physical and mental. Those are usually what people tend to focus on. The other ones are intellectual, social, spiritual, vocational, and environmental. So, but that physical and that emotional and intellectual kind of all fall into each other, kind of overlap each other. So you can get things like heart racing, blood pressure issues. You can get, sleep issues. And so like the stress and that kind of stuff can cause the physical aspects of it too.
Let me ask you about the dimensions. How do we go about measuring that? I mean, so what you're saying is overall wellness is not just measured by how physically fit you are. but also mental state or emotional state, your social state. How do we measure for you when you sit down with a client? How are you measuring how well they are?
So like for example, I mean, there's so many different ways to measure like physical wellness. It could be like benchmarks of like your blood pressure, your blood sugar levels, or it could be like your heart rate. Emotional, if you're an emotionally well person, you know how to manage your feelings, you know how to you know how you're coming across in conversations or communicating with people, you know how to be resilient in situations like this, you can bounce back. So that's a little bit tougher to measure. And I know my mental health professionals will be able to probably answer that a little bit better, but some of those things are a little bit tough to actually measure. But if you're kind of following suggestions on how to stay mentally well or intellectually well, like by stimulating your brain, socially well by still reaching out to people, because I mean, social distancing does not have to mean social isolation right now. So that's another thing too. I kind of tell people that I'd rather call it physical distancing. You know, still reach out to people if you need to, whether it's professionals, whether it's friends, families. So all of that really does tie into each other, even though it can be a little tough to measure. The physical stuff's easier to measure usually, but just kind of following guidelines that are set forth is probably the best way to do that.
As someone who works in this field, obviously you're going through the whole, I mean, you're going to work, but you're still going through this whole quarantine process, just like everyone else in the country is around the world. What are things that you're seeing and or what concerns you with people's wellness during this time? I mean, are you seeing a decline in overall wellness? Are you seeing struggles? And from a professional perspective, what concerns you?
So luckily technology is amazing, and again, it kind of depends on the generation. I think like some of the younger generations, maybe even starting up with boomers and coming down to some of the other generations, and then mine is millennials. Some of these generations are a little bit more familiar with technology, so they can be more resilient in this situation, and they can research a little bit better on how to do their workouts at home and do things like that. But when it comes to the older adults that I work with, it can be really tough. They can really suffer from social isolation and the social distancing. So it is really important for the professionals who work with them to kind of help them find ways to stay healthy and find ways to not get into a depression or get anxiety during this situation, because that's certainly an issue too with a lot of people, is kind of focus on the news and focus on these issues, and then you start to get anxiety and depression.
Yeah, and obviously I think given your job, there's a lot of us who aren't, none of us are necessarily maxing out our wellness in every single category, right? They're all things that we're better at, things that we struggle with. Moments like this and situations like this, is there a risk factor in the sense that things that we might struggle with we're at a greater risk of struggling with it? So for example, if we have mental health struggles, does the quarantine period potentially make that worse? Or if we're struggling with physical fitness, does that quarantine process potentially make that worse?
So I've seen it go both ways. I think yes and no. Certainly people who already suffer from depression, this can be pretty dangerous for. But at the same time, some introverts might be like people who are considered introverts maybe might be really thriving during this time. Or some people who have depression triggered by other things, they might be doing better because they can focus on their physical health if they have all this extra time. So it really depends on the person, I think, and definitely with the physical health too, because if someone relied on like a structure of a personal trainer or structure of a class, and now they don't have that structure, they could feel lost right now. So that's definitely posing an issue, I think, for most people.
Sure. So is outlook, I mean, is that a big factor in this, how someone approaches the stay-at-home order or the quarantine time in impacting what I guess the outcome for their wellness is?
I do believe so. When I speak with my current clients and residents who tend to feel a little bit isolated, or they tend to say, this is just awful, like we should be able to go out and do things, I say, one of the suggestions for helping your mental or emotional wellness is to kind of change the way you think. So I say, you know, try to change it to positive thoughts, try to find like a silver lining, try to say, you know, in this grand scheme of things and the amount of years that you live, this will hopefully be a very short period of time that we're going through this. And there's different ways that there's different things you can do. You can try to start a new hobby. You can try to start new recipes. You can try to, you know, start new exercise. So there's ways to change your frame of thinking, frame of mind, to try to make it more positive and, you know, have a better outlook so you're not so down in the dumps about the whole situation.
Kierra, that's great advice. Hold that thought. I want to pick up right there when we come back. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Kierra, thank you again for joining us. I want to pick up the conversation right where we left off. You were talking about changing mindset. And I want to kind of shift this conversation to things that people can do to stay healthy, to stay well, given the cards that we've been dealt, which is no one's fault, but it's the situation that we're in. So let me ask you, generally, you're talking about changing mindset, potentially finding new hobbies, thinking differently about situations. What are some specific things that people should be watching for? Are there signs that they should be watching for that their wellness is declining? Are there signs that they should be watching for as far as potentially that they're becoming too negative? What are things that we should all be watching for?
So, like I said before, someone who's like a psychologist and a mental health professional can probably answer it a little bit better. But from my understanding of emotional wellness and emotional health, there are specific signs of depression and anxiety. And, you know, generally, if people start to lose interest, just general interest in your daily activities, or lose interest in life itself, you know, it's hard to kind of feel motivated or hard to get up and move around. I mean, I know there can be lazy days here and there, which is totally fine. I have my lazy days, but if it's like day in and day out where you start to kind of lose interest in just getting up and doing your daily activities, that can be a sign of some depression. And kind of the same thing with physical. If you're finding that you're like really exhausted all the time, that's where like mental and physical kind of overlap. So those are some signs to look out for and to kind of try to find ways to help yourself. And there are, you know, national hotlines and things like that too. But those are some signs that people should look out for during this time.
Okay. Obviously, we can't control the situation we've been handed, but there are certain factors that we can control. We're seeing a lot of conversation about trying to get some exercise in at home or trying to eat healthy during the quarantine. What recommendations do you have on that? And I mean, I've been joking on social media about quarantine cookies, which I'm assuming is not the best recommendation for staying healthy. But what are some things that we can control in a situation like this that you would recommend?
So, like I mentioned before, technology is an amazing thing. And most places, whether it's fitness centers that people belong to, wellness centers, or even health networks, they're offering some free online fitness classes and tips. I know, like, if you have a certain streaming service, there are a lot of free things on there as well, classes, whether it be like yoga or aerobics classes, strength classes. So luckily, technology is wonderful. Luckily, you can find a lot of free stuff right now because gyms are closed. A lot of wellness centers are closed, so you can find those resources. And then you can always reach out if you have a personal trainer. Most of the time, they are still doing some things online too.
Let me follow up with how much of a role does healthy eating play in this as well? I mean, generally imagine, you know, they balance fitness or physical fitness with the exercise as well as the eating. I have found it increasingly easy to just binge on quarantine snacks. How important is it to be eating healthy during a time like this?
Yeah, so definitely important, especially if you're not moving around as much. And eating healthy does have an effect on your mental health too. So like certain vitamins, or like even vitamin B12, finding enough of that in your diet does help with with things like depression, anxiety. So eating healthy really does actually affect your mental health too. So again, you can find a lot of things online with healthy recipes or suggested meal plans and things like that. So really use the internet. That's a great resource to try to find some tips there.
Yeah. So it's really, the solutions seem to be very comprehensive, kind of in the same way you're saying that the problems are that doing one thing will bring benefits, not just to physical or mental or social fitness, but all of them.
Yeah.
It contributes to that. Kierra, let me ask this. For you, you're working during this time, but how are you staying healthy and well during the quarantine process? Having to be, after work, having, the stay-at-home orders, the limitations on who you can see and all that. How have you been managing? How are you managing, these 7 different dimensions?
So the physical is a little bit tough right now since it's not my normal routine. And I have a 1-year-old at home, and we've been following those guidelines where my husband and my son and I only leave to go to work or grocery shopping. So when we do come home, I take advantage of the weather. So I try to get outside as much as I can. And that's another thing as well. The fresh air and sunshine helps your health and your mental health. So I try to get outside, go for walks. I use the baby during workouts as well, because he's a good 20 pounds. So sometimes I'll do some squats and hold him while I do that. So really and he loves it. He loves it. So
he's a free weight.
He really is. He's not, I don't know, he squirms too much. So a little bit tough, but so that is definitely a challenge. And since I'm someone who has a background in fitness, it's easier for me to try to work around that and to try to be creative. So for others, it's not quite so easy. That's why it's good to try to use whatever resources you can. And same thing with nutrition. I try to plan my shopping trips ahead of time, especially when you're supposed to be staying home pretty often. And I try to plan out meals for the week. And that way it's a lot easier to get everything all at once, and you can plan your meals ahead of time.
Yeah. Kierra, I appreciate that. It sounds like, obviously all the different elements of the health of wellness are intertwined and related. Yeah. And the idea of planning ahead, let's not just, we take this day by day, but let's have a plan to do that. So I appreciate that. Thank you for the advice. Thank you for joining us. Don't go away. When we come back, we'll be sitting down with Kierra James, an Olympic athlete training for the 2020 Olympics, and she'll be talking a little bit about her training regimen and what that's like. Don't go away. Welcome back. Fitness in a time of pandemic is a difficult thing to master. It is even more difficult when you're one of the world's elite athletes. Kierra James races. She's a track cyclist for the New Zealand national team and was in the midst of training for the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo when the Olympics were postponed for a year. And she joins us now all the way from New Zealand. Kierra, good morning to you in New Zealand, and welcome to Face the Issues.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's really cool to be on your show.
Yeah, well, my pleasure. It's good to see you. I see you're doing well, and obviously grateful for that. First, before we even jump into the cycling, how are things in New Zealand with the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, so we have been in a state of lockdown for the past nearly 6 weeks. So New Zealand announced a 4-level alert system, 1 being the lowest level of alert and 4 being the highest. And so we closed our borders and went into alert level 4 after we had just a handful of cases. And we seem to have done really well at trying to stamp out the virus. And we're hoping to go, we're in level 3 currently, and we're hoping to go down to level 2 next week, which means that more non-essential businesses can reopen, things like gyms and cinemas. And it also means that I can train with my teammates again. So we're really looking forward to it.
Well, we hope then we join you in hoping for that. Speaking of training with your teammates, let me ask you this. You were in the middle of training for the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo. I met you a few years ago when you were in the States racing, and then you were talking about this goal What was it like? What was your reaction when you heard the news that they were postponing the Olympic Games?
I think as the pandemic was escalating, we all had a feeling that the Olympics might not go ahead. But we were still kind of training full steam ahead in the hope that things might settle down and that the show would go on, I guess. So when the announcement came, it was kind of just a sobering realization to how bad the pandemic currently is and what the projections might be. So I think all of us were pretty upset with the news, but definitely understood why it needed to happen in terms of what was happening around the world.
Sure. And how does that shift your training schedule, Kirsty? I mean, obviously you train for a major event like the Olympics. There's a timetable that I imagine that timetable gets thrown off now.
Yeah, definitely. We had a really specific path that we were on track for, and we were meeting our targets along the way. And so when we heard the announcement of the postponement, I guess personally I felt pretty lost, not only because the Olympics had moved, but also a lot of other parts of my life that I was looking forward to were in the unknown category as well. Like I wanted to finish my master's and start my psychology registration. And we also wanted to go and visit my husband's family who live in Zambia and think about starting a family and a whole lot of things like that. So I guess personally, I took the postponement news pretty hard and really struggled in a place of not really knowing what to do for the first couple weeks until we had some really good regrouping as a team and started to set some little short-term goals moving forward and just, I guess, reassess where we're at and took the opportunity to see it as another chance to continue the cool journey that we get to be on together as a team.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I think so many people forget that our athletes, we see them on TV, but they're people, they're humans, just like the rest of us. And you have a life that you're living and dreams and goals, and everything kind of gets put off when one big event like the Olympics gets postponed. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective. Curious, let me ask you this. We talk a lot about the challenges. You have been in lockdown in New Zealand. Most of the United States is in lockdown or some form of quarantine. And there's a lot of people who are complaining about the gyms are closed and I can't work out and I can't do this. How have you been able to stay healthy and stay fit while you're in lockdown?
Well, I guess for us as track cyclists, the main drawback is that we can't be on the track training with our teammates. However, we do spend a lot of the year racing on the road anyway. So we've taken this lockdown as just a time to really train locally in our area. And I've also signed up for this basically cycling video game called Zwift, where you put your bike on a power trainer, it measures your power, and you compete against other cyclists who are doing the same thing from all over the world, which has been really cool. I'm not usually a huge fan of the indoor trainer, but that's made it a lot more exciting. So I've also set up some home gym equipment and been doing 2 or 3 home gym workouts a week, which has also been really good to be able to keep the strength training going. So I guess in relation to other sports, we're pretty lucky. We can do probably 90% of our training, whereas one of my friends is a springboard diver, and yeah, she has to be pretty creative to try and practice for that, I guess. So we're on the
I can't imagine there are many places you can train at home for diving.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's how Kirsty, how difficult is it? I mean, obviously you want to be back on the track, you want to be back with your teammates. How difficult has it been to have to train alone at home? Is there a mental toll to this? How are you working through some of those things?
Yeah, I think, I've been an athlete full time for probably about 12 years. I've never really struggled with motivation. But when the news of the postponement came through, I had a really rough patch with motivation. I didn't really know what I was training for. The goals are really unclear. And I didn't appreciate for how much of a toll that took on my body. I had to reduce all of my goals and try and just get through some sessions rather than achieve specific targets. So I think I knew academically that stress and worry takes a toll on you physically, but I guess when you experience it firsthand like that, you realize how much your body suffers when you're under a lot of stress. So it was definitely really rough for the first couple of weeks until I did some processing with our psychology team and my coach and set new goals and things like that. So,
Kierra, real quick, few seconds here. How excited are you now for 2021?
Yeah, I think it's actually the only event that we've got coming up on the calendar. So we're really excited to represent New Zealand, and we're really hopeful that the 2021 Olympics will go ahead. Really looking forward to it.
Well, same here. Kierra, thank you for joining us, and best of luck to you. Obviously, my loyalties are with the United States, but for track cycling, I will be cheering for New Zealand, and especially for you. I can't say more. I can't say enough about just how great of a friend you've been, and wishing you all the best in Tokyo.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. That is all the time we have tonight. My thanks to both Kierra Varcos and Kierra James for joining us. Tune in again next week as we continue our conversation on the impact that COVID-19 is having. My name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.